Good evening and welcome to Dead Sleep True Crime for Bedtime. I'm Nancy Miller, the creator of this podcast, and what you are about to hear is a short teaser for the latest bonus episode. As you may or may not know, Dead Sleep is 100% ad-free and listener-supported. That means it really does rely on you, the listener, to succeed. If you would like to ensure the success of this podcast and enjoy a subscriber-only bonus episode each month, please feel free to subscribe via Spotify, Patreon, and Apple Podcasts. Just a few dollars a month really does make a difference in covering the essential production costs in making this podcast. Thank you for supporting my work, and I hope my work supports you. You can enjoy a free month on Apple Podcasts and a free 7-day trial on Patreon. Thank you. And now, on to the teaser of the latest bonus episode. Inspiration. It can come from anywhere. Some of true crime's greatest sagas, discovered in the humblest of places. A reporter stumbles upon something that captures their interest. A little thread, begging to be pulled. And in this instance, the thread was tugged by a reporter in San Francisco who happened to come across a press release. Just 2 paragraphs about a court decision in a stalking case up in Sacramento. Those 2 paragraphs became a 2-year investigative journey into a very dark tale of addiction and obsession, of manipulation and control, and what happens when the very mechanisms put in place to protect us are used as weapons to destroy us. You'll hear all about it in this episode of Dead Sleep True Crime for Bedtime. It's Nancy, and this is the May 2026 bonus episode. Thank you for your generous support. Tonight's episode is drawn from a recent feature published just a few days ago, and it is an incredible piece of journalism. It was reported and written by an investigative journalist named Matthias Gaffney, published in the San Francisco Chronicle. And the title of the article is The Wrong Stalker. And I want to make sure that I give Matthias Gaffney appropriate credit, because these days, these true crime stories take off and they're spread through podcasts and in documentaries. And the original hardworking local reporter can sometimes get lost in the shuffle. So many thanks to Matthias Gaffney for his 2 years of investigative work and his incredible instincts in seeing in a 2-paragraph press release, which most of us writers and editors ignore. He saw something, and it turned out to be an extraordinary story. And I will link to it in the show notes. This is, of course, the Dead Sleep version of events, which are factual but transformed for nighttime listening with my twist on things. Because that story, in the Chronicle, it starts in present day, around 2020 to 2025. And therefore, much of the drama plays out over texts and emails. But I think to really understand the full scope of what happened, we need some crucial backstory. And to do that, we must travel back in time, around 40 years, back to the 1980s, an era of landlines and letters. The spring of 1982. Somewhere in a mid-century apartment building in West Hollywood, a 27-year-old actress named Teresa Saldana rushed into her apartment to answer the ringing phone. It was her mother, back in Brooklyn. "Where have you been?" Her mother practically panted. "I've been trying to reach you all day." Teresa explained. She was doing what she always did all day, Ma. She drove around all of Los Angeles in her beat-up car, puttering from dance class to voice class to an audition, then another audition, and then another audition. It was nearly the end of pilot season, a busy time of year in Hollywood, January to April, when TV networks shoot a whole slew of pilots for the upcoming fall season. And this being 1982, landing a job as an actress on a TV series was good money, real income. And that evening in March, she told her mother she had a good feeling about a possible role in an upcoming sitcom. But her mother interrupted her to tell her she had bigger news. She'd been trying to reach her because earlier that day, she received a phone call from Martin Scorsese. Well, it was Martin Scorsese's assistant. This assistant said that Martin Scorsese wanted Teresa for his new picture. His lead actress just dropped out. It was short notice, but he wondered if Teresa might be available for the part. And if so, he needed her address and phone number because they didn't know how to reach her. They'd likely want to send someone over there with a script immediately. And of course, Mrs. Saldana never gave out her daughter's phone number, but this was Martin Scorsese, so it made sense because Teresa had recently moved with her husband to this apartment in West Hollywood, and with that move came a new landline, a new phone number. So she gave the assistant the information. Teresa was thrilled. A few years earlier, she worked with Martin Scorsese on the movie Raging Bull. It was a supporting role as Robert De Niro's sister-in-law, but a lead part. This could make a career. Teresa did think it was a little odd that Scorsese's assistant had called her parents, especially because they had an unlisted number, which would have been harder to get than just calling her manager, Selma, here in LA. Then again, it was Martin Scorsese. And you can imagine if you were Martin Scorsese's assistant, well, whatever Martin Scorsese wanted, he got, even if it meant tracking down someone's parents in Brooklyn. Her mother didn't say much more than that. She said she was a little overwhelmed by the whole thing. It all happened so fast. And this man, he had this strange accent. He was hard to understand. But she wanted her to know that this call was coming. And it was very exciting. Or it should have been. She wasn't sure what her husband was going to say about it. Her husband wasn't in the business. He was a drug counselor at a local rehab. They'd only been married 3 years, but already there were signs of trouble. Teresa and her husband clashed over the direction of her career. Her husband didn't like to be alone. He wanted his wife to get a TV job here in Los Angeles. And he wouldn't be happy if she left to film another movie. But for Teresa, this was the kind of role you dream of. But before she got ahead of herself, she had to speak with her manager, Selma. As if on cue, the phone rang. And it was indeed her manager, Selma, on the other line. "Teresa, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all day." Teresa's chain-smoking business manager, Selma, she was a Hollywood veteran. But in that phone call, Teresa heard something in her manager's voice she'd never heard before. Fear. As Selma anxiously puffed on a cigarette, she told Teresa she'd received a strange phone call earlier that day. It was from a man who said he was Martin Scorsese's assistant and he needed Teresa Saldana's address and phone number to get in touch about a part. Which, of course, Selma knew he couldn't possibly be Martin Scorsese's assistant because she knew Martin Scorsese's assistant and he wasn't Scottish, and this man had a very thick Scottish accent. And when she pressed him on this fact, this man hung up. Soon after he hung up that time, he called back. Only this time, the very same man claimed to be an agent at William Morris, the biggest agency in all of Hollywood. And, once again, he asked for Teresa Saldana's phone number and address. Somehow in their conversation, Selma got his name. He said his name was Arthur Richard Jackson. And she let Mr. Arthur Richard Jackson know she didn't believe for 1 minute that he was an agent at William Morris. And let him know that he would not be getting Teresa Saldana's address and phone number. And she hung up. But this guy sounded really weird. And she wanted to call and let Teresa know that there was this man looking for her address and phone number, and it was a little scary. But rest assured, Selma had not given away her address or phone number, so don't worry, he didn't have it. But, yes, he did. Teresa explained to her manager that this man had also called her mother, and her mother gave out her phone number and her address. And now Teresa was here alone, waiting for her husband to get home from work. What was she going to do? Was this real? Teresa never considered calling the police because there was no crime. But her manager told her very clearly to take this seriously, to go to a neighbor's house and stay there until her husband got home. She couldn't be too careful, okay? The next 40 steps had to be the most terrifying steps Teresa had ever taken. As she left her apartment, slowly and cautiously walked down the stairs to the first floor. She lived in one of those 2-story apartment buildings built in the 1960s, where there was a pool in the center, and all around that swimming pool were these dimly lit pockets of landscaping, trees, bougainvillea, so many places for someone to hide. Teresa carefully, cautiously walked down the stairs, looking over her shoulder every second, until she made her way to a neighbor's house, and she banged on the door and begged to be let inside. And that's where she stayed for the next 3 hours until her husband came home. And when she explained to him what was happening, that there was a man with their address, possibly looking for her, his response wasn't as sympathetic as Teresa may have hoped. Why, he raged, did she have to be an actress? She'd practically made herself a target. He demanded that Teresa was not allowed to go anywhere alone. He had to be with her at all times. Of course, Teresa said. She didn't want to go anywhere alone. She was scared. Over the next few days, her husband was her personal escort wherever she went, which created even more tension between the two. And at a certain point, Teresa got angry. It wasn't fair that she had to curtail her life because there was some man out there. She wasn't going to let some random weirdo ruin her life. So the next morning, March 15th, 1982, Teresa said goodbye to her husband while he was in the shower, and she made her way down to her car, which was parked right out in front of her building. It was a morning Teresa would later remember as bright and shiny. But as she unlocked the door to her car, she felt a shadow looming behind her. And in the driver's side window, she saw a figure, the reflection of a man's face. In a deep voice with a thick Scottish accent, the man asked if she was Teresa Saldana. Teresa didn't say a word. She just grimly nodded as she slowly turned around until she and this man were face to face. He towered over her. Before she could run or even scream, the man pulled out a kitchen knife. Then he raised the knife over his head and plunged it into her body. Again and again. Her chest, stomach, arms, legs. Teresa felt every single slice of that blade. But more painful was the realization that a crowd had formed, and the people around her were going to stand there and let her die. She couldn't see all the faces, but she could hear their voices. Someone saying, "Let's get out of here." And those who didn't flee in fear, they just stood there, watching. Somewhere in this chaos, Teresa wondered if she explained what was happening, maybe someone would intervene. So she just kept yelling over and over, "He's killing me. He's killing me. He's killing me." And she repeated that as loud as she could until the knife finally punctured her lung and she couldn't scream anymore because she could barely breathe. By then, she was on the ground, the man continuing his attack. And she realized this was where she was going to die, in the middle of the street, helpless and alone, in front of a crowd of people. The actress and her final performance. And then as she gasped what she thought was her last breath, she saw him, an angel, a brawny blonde guy in his 20s who happened to be delivering a water cooler nearby. He heard the shouting, saw a flash of that knife, then pushed through the crowd, overpowered the man, wrestled the knife out of his hand, and pinned him down until the police arrived. She'd never forget that face, the face in the crowd who saved her life. She and that delivery driver, his name was Jeff Fenn. They'd be friends for the rest of their lives. But back in 1982, at just 27 years old, Teresa Saldana had a long road ahead of her. There were the physical injuries, 10 stab wounds. And then there was the psychological trauma for herself and for those she loved. Her mother was consumed with guilt. She was the one who gave out her daughter's address to her attacker. And Teresa tried to assure her it wasn't her fault. This man was determined to find her, especially when she learned from authorities that her attacker had hired a private investigator to track her down. This included gaining access to her parents' unlisted phone number and personal information directly through the Department of Motor Vehicles. And it was possible her attacker might have secured Teresa's personal information from the DMV directly had she not just moved with her husband. Her husband, he was ashamed. He'd failed to protect his wife, and he didn't want to talk about it. He told her that it was for the best if they just moved on. She couldn't. So as her marriage broke up, Teresa formed a support group for other women like her, survivors, victims who'd experienced something similar, women who were targets of harassment, threats, stalking, but they weren't in the spotlight. They were everyday women from all walks of life whose aggressors were the men in their lives, boyfriends, bosses, ex-husbands. The fear Teresa felt over a matter of days. Many of these women lived for months, years. And if they wanted the police to help, there wasn't anything the cops could do. Following a woman, harassing her, it was scary. But in the eyes of the law, there was no crime. There was no physical force. It was hard for people who hadn't experienced this to understand that all of this constant emotional, psychological malice, it was a crime. Or it should be. Teresa wondered maybe people would get it, if they could see it, feel it. So she decided to do something bold. Teresa decided to show audiences what this experience was like by creating a TV movie about what happened to her. It was called Victims for Victims, the Teresa Saldana story. And in that TV movie, Teresa played herself, bravely reliving every single scene, including her attack and the long road to recovery. And the movie is definitely an 80s throwback. Her husband is played by Adrian Zemed from Grease 2 fame. But watching it on YouTube all these years later, the experience of witnessing a survivor recreating her own attack on screen, the effect is still very gripping. Raising awareness. It's a phrase that's overused these days, but back then, Victims for Victims, the Teresa Saldana story, really did open people's eyes around the dangerous consequences of harassment and stalking. The fundamental question was, how do you protect someone from a dangerous stalker before they escalate? Teresa's stalker, well, he became obsessed with her after seeing the movie Raging Bull. And after he attacked her, he was swiftly arrested, charged, convicted, and spent roughly a decade in prison before he was sent back to the UK. But Teresa wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. In 1986, a teenage boy wrote a fan letter to a young actress named Rebecca Schaefer. She found the note sweet and wrote him back to say thank you. Over the next 3 years, this fan harassed her, writing her more letters, then traveling from Arizona to the studio where she was filming her new TV series, bringing with him gifts, letters, even a life-size teddy bear. The security guards on that set sensed the guy was a weirdo, and they shooed him away. But at the time, he was just a creep, nothing more. But in 1989, he took the next step. And this isn't widely known, but Rebecca Schaefer's stalker was a copycat. He actually drew direct inspiration from the tactics used by Teresa Saldana's attacker. He paid an LA-based private investigator to track down Rebecca Schaefer's home address and phone number, records that were legally available at that time from the DMV. And just like Teresa's attacker, he posed as some Hollywood assistant and claimed, at least to this PI, that he needed to send Rebecca Schaefer a script. And one summer day in 1989, his obsession with Rebecca Schaefer turned to rage. He took a gun, went to 21-year-old Rebecca's apartment twice, and on that second visit, he shot her in the chest when she opened the front door. These two tragedies would go on to push legislators to make new laws in the state of California. This included California's landmark anti-stalking and harassment legislation, which criminalized stalking under a Penal Code 6469. And that penal code states, in part, any person who willfully, maliciously, and repeatedly follows or willfully and maliciously harasses another person with the intent to place that person in reasonable fear for his or her safety or the safety of his or her immediate family is guilty of the crime of stalking. 1990 was just the beginning. There would be more laws, more protections put in place. In 1994, there was another law that helped protect people's private information, including records at the DMV, so that young women just like them, along with untold others, would never have to feel the terror, the fear of a stalker. Women just like 39-year-old Bridget Adams, who stood in front of a judge in December of 2022, begging for the court to save her life. It was days before Christmas, and what she wanted was the gift of peace. The comfort and joy of knowing the man who'd stalked her relentlessly for months was not going to be allowed anywhere near her. Not her office, her home, not her DMs, emails, text messages. What she was looking for was an emergency restraining order. And as Bridget spoke to the court that day, anyone could see the toll these past few months had had on her. Her dark brown hair looked unkempt, her skin color a sallow gray, her eyes bleary behind a pair of librarian-style glasses. This man, she said, was a drug addict, and he'd transferred his addiction to heroin to an addiction to her. In fact, Your Honor, just today, December 22nd, 2022, hours before she was here in this courtroom, he'd sent her a terrifying and vicious email. One that vacillated between desire and rage. Someone in court shared the screenshot of this email, and it was indeed terrifying. He called her a dumb bee. He said he couldn't wait for her to die, but at the same time, he complimented her on the outfit that she was wearing that very day. Then he said something coy about how he wanted to kiss her, but he was too shy. And he ended this whole deranged email with two emojis, a laughing face and a kissing face. She had other screenshots, text messages, all kinds of communication, one-sided, of course. And this was perhaps the cruelest of ironies. For all of these new laws that were meant to protect people from stalking and harassment, there were just as many new ways for someone to stalk and harass. Luckily for Bridget Adams, she got her Christmas wish. The judge granted that restraining order. But if Bridget Adams thought this restraining order marked the end, she was wrong. Her nightmare was just beginning. And to think this all started because Bridget Adams just wanted to help people.